If you were to sit with a rational person and tell them what I learned, they would immediately be a convert. Sprouts are the solution. They're super nutritious because they're high fiber, low calorie, low fat, low sugar. So the ultimate weight loss food. Then there's a level of, in America, 90 million people that are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Sprouts actually help regulate insulin levels in diabetics because of the medicinal properties of opening up new pathways in the body. I know that it works at my core, like inside, I really know unequivocally. That's powerful.
So yeah, brother, thank you for coming on the show. So I first heard about you, it must have been about 4 years ago. You had a conversation with Jesse Itzler, and that guy, anything that he is back, because I'm curious about, is this worth giving my time? And I remember you had a conversation with him. I'm sure you've known him for a long time, but this was about 4 years ago. And I don't, did you change your
Yeah.
Instagram handle? Were you called the Sprout Guy? Did that change?
No, I was always Doug Evans,
Okay. But yeah,
but but Jessie and I did a live when my
yeah,
book launched.
that was it. Yeah. How long ago was that then? When was the book out?
That was April 2020.
Yeah. Okay. Feels like a hell of a lot longer. Um, so what's changed in the Sprout world since the book?
Well, look, I think since the book came out, you know, hundreds of thousands of people around the world have started to sprout, right? And we've seen just a global lift in people becoming aware of this innate. The biggest things that changed, over these last few years is I was rediscovering this innate knowledge around sprouting because I'd been sprouting for, at the time, over 25 years. But I
Yeah.
always thought of sprouts as a garnish or as a side dish.
Mm,
And when, the book came out, it was the declaration of the power and potential of sprouts.
yeah.
So
The
3 years
exponential.
later, the potential. So now 3 years later, the tenacity of conviction that I have around the sprouts and the sprouting has evolved really far to the level of deep confidence, like in my soul, like that this direction is the right thing to do, and that it's very clear, and that the ideas are real. So you kind of have that moment where you think you're right, and then it's like if you've ever played a game of cards and you think you got a good hand, and then you get that final ace, and you have the winning hand, you have that royal flush. That's how I feel with the sprouts now. Like I feel I have the royal flush.
Hmm. And what kind of things have you seen then in how it's changed, say, person to person? Like what feedback have you got like from personal, maybe it's reviews or how it's come your way through like how it's changed personal experience for people when they started to implement
Oh,
and change their lifestyle?
well, I mean, I've seen people literally lose a half a pound to 1 pound a day, by eating sprouts, like literally, incredible weight loss, right? 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds. And you could translate into kilos, right? 4 or 5 kilos to 20 kilos, people are losing from it. From my own experience, I posted a vanity shot on my Instagram, last week,
Yeah.
because I've been, I was always eating some sprouts, but I increased my sprout capacity, and I started to get movement, and I started to get gains in my workout. And so I just thought I would share that. And the response at now 57 years old, more energy, more life force. And, I trimmed this fat. I had this like little bits of fat around my waist that had been there for decades. and burned right through that. So that was key. One of the other people had asthma their entire life, and they would wake up every day wondering if they would survive the day. And they had these steroid-based inhalers in every coat, in every pocket, in every glove compartment, every bag, because if they were having an asthma attack, they would need, to have that there. And now the person is asthma free, like asthma free. And so little things like that, I've seen just, but on a more fundamental level, the literally tens of thousands of people that were not eating vegetables before in their diet, that now are growing their own sprouts and sharing their success around it, is key. And I remember when someone sent me a picture of their 5-year-old or 7-year-old kid growing sprouts. I thought that was an anomaly. And then I got more and more and more and more. And now it seems like, aha, kids, in addition to liking their screens, like to watch things that grow and like to eat things that are alive and tender and have this, organic feel.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's so many things that the book just confirms in so many ways, and how you can just grow your own organic food. It can be very cost effective. It can be easy, convenient. There is really no against, if you want to take care of yourself and double down on nutrition and all things like health, really. There's no argument against sprouts. Like, as you know, I feel when it gets to diets, it's really hard, and I've understood over my own journey, it's really hard to measure one thing in isolation, because so many things happen when people start to maybe understand sprouts and like try that, but then they're also being conscious of other things in their life, and it kind of goes hand in hand with things. That's why I rarely have anyone on the podcast talking about diets and talking about food, because it's such a, I guess, convoluted discussion, because we can find evidence for so much. But the one thing and reason why I'm so connected to sprouts is because it just feels different. It just feels different to many other diets, to many other things that we can focus on, because you can really control like where they come from, how they grow. Like it's you can be part of the process,
Yeah.
and it's powerful. And we're going to dive into a bit more of like how it's what the potency of sprouts is, and why everyone can just kind of go down this route of sprouts.
Well, look, I think it's well known that vegetables are healthy,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, there's a few people that are off the rails that think that vegetables are trying to kill you, and we'll eliminate those corner case people. But in general, it's well known that vegetables are good for you. The longest living populations are either vegetarian, vegan, or high plant-based consumption. And sprouts are vegetables. And not only are they vegetables, they're tender young vegetables. And this was new information, but it's now well documented in research that the smaller the vegetable, the more concentrated the nutrient content is. So it's as a vegetable gets bigger, it may be getting more fiber, it may be getting more water, it may be bigger, but the certain concentrated nutrients get diluted, that they're most potent in the small form. And so therefore, the bioavailability and the accessibility to these small vegetables are like stem cells. They're just highly prolific. And, some subtle things you could taste. Like if you were to take a salad and do a chopped salad with like romaine and other greens, the leaves of the lettuces, would scar, they would bleed, they'd become very tender, and they'd really become mealy quite quickly. And if you take the sprouts maintain their whole like organic structure, because the leaf of a plant was removed from the plant, removed from the stem, removed from the roots, removed from the earth. And it's, when you cut it, it's dying. The sprout, on the other hand, is this complete living organism with the root and the shoot and the endosperm and the embryo all intact. And it's continuing to grow, whether it be in the jar or it be in a bowl or it be in the refrigerator. It is still alive and thriving. And so when you think about whole food, when you're eating the sprout, it's whole food. Now, when you compare a sprout to a chopped vegetable, like the chopped vegetable, it's like it's already gone. It's like, decaying, trying to hold itself together, where the sprout is just flourishing. And you could see it, you can taste it, you can observe the chewing and the structure of the plant as you're consuming it. That it's very exciting to be able to be in that level where you're eating something that's so fresh, right? And when you're growing your own and you can have that option for fresh, that's exciting.
So let's take it to the seed then, because this is what we're cultivating, right? We're cultivating the seed. So aren't seeds created equal? There's got to be, there's such a variety, but how do we know where the seeds are coming from, like how they're treated, and genetically modified seeds, like does that come into this? And how does someone know how good a seed is? Because how good a seed is how good the soil is, how good the process has been. So where does all that feature?
It's a great question. I think that, as in all things, having trusted sources make a big difference. So, what I look for in a seed is, where's the origin? Is it USA? Is it Europe? Is it China? Right? Is it Philippines? And, the closer the seed is to you, probably the better, right? So as more local as possible. In the US, we have USDA certified organic, which is a higher standard of non-GMO food and non-pesticide sprayed food. So those are, another things to look for. When you're thinking about the seeds themselves, seeds could be fresh or seeds can be old. And the fresher the seed, the higher the germination rate will be. So, we can count the seeds and establish a pro rata or pro forma of what the germination rate is, and then document that. And that might mean literally taking 100 seeds, germinating them, and see, how many germinate out of that 100 or how many don't germinate, right? So the reverse counting part. So you can have that. And so those are important distinctions. And another thing that you could do is you could take a test batch of seeds and take the wastewater and send it to a lab and test for pathogen content, whether it's E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella. And so, what I found is that it was the wild, wild west. So I wanted to put some boundaries around it for my own edification and purpose. And so the sprouting company, all of their seeds have USDA organic tested for pathogens and tested for high germination rate as a standard protocol of all of the seeds in there, except there might be a specialty seed that might have higher levels of sulforaphane, which may not have been USDA organic, but they'd probably be pesticide free and tested for Monsanto Roundup, or also known as the chemical glyphosate. So, those are the things that either you want organic or you want to get them tested to make sure they don't have glyphosate Roundup on them.
So where do broccoli seeds, how would you farm broccoli seeds? Is it like a certain female side of the plant that we don't see, or how does that even work?
Oh, these are great questions, Chris. So what happens is the familiar broccoli that people see, those florets, if left in the ground to grow, will flower. And after the flowers wane, little pods will shoot up where the flowers were. They're like rods or green beans, and inside of them contains this massive amount of broccoli seeds. So it goes from seed to sprout to microgreen to garden vegetable to flowering vegetable to then fruiting vegetable. So the seeds come within the fruit of the flowering plant.
So someone who grows their own broccoli, they may leave in a couple of plants over here and then
That's right.
allow them to sprout, allow them to seed, and then they take the seed. Is that do you have to dry them out? Do you have to, like, what do you go for, have you learned much about that process for someone to actually germinate?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I save my seeds on some crops as well that I'm growing. And I'm very familiar, with it. It's amazing, like the circle of life, that one seed can replicate itself into thousands of seeds, and then the next generation, thousands. That it's not far-fetched to think that seeds can multiply themselves into millions. And I'm working on a white paper right now with Dr. Jed Fahey and Jack Smilovitz, data scientist, on the life cycle analysis and the environmentally friendly components of sprouts. But whereas it may take 1,500 gallons of water to grow a pound of beef, you could grow a pound of sprouts with 1 gallon of water. So 1/1500th. And for those in the UK, a gallon is about 4 liters.
Yeah, I think the exponential growth of how you can continue that cycle, like you talked about the oak tree analogy of, like, in a lifetime it's like over 3 million seeds, essentially acorn trees, but like when you apply that to sprouts, is like, it makes a lot of sense to get a lot of nutrition from sprouts.
It's unreal. So I think that 3 years ago I had these ideas, but now seeing them in action is really just like beyond my wildest expectations, to the point that I need to like sit back, recalibrate, and think about how much more further it could be. I'll give you an example. You mentioned, Jessie Itzler in our earlier conversation. I FaceTimed Jessie maybe 6 weeks ago, and he said, "Oh, I'm having my Running Man event in Georgia. If you want to come talk about sprouts, you can." So like I get on a plane, I go to Georgia, and the show coordinator said, "Okay, Doug, you could do a breakout session." I said, "Well, I prefer to be on the main stage with Jessie." And she's like, "No, it's booked like out. We've got talent, we've got things. But if you want, you could do 2 breakout sessions, one today and one tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay, great." So I do my breakout session, and Jessie sits in the front row of the breakout session for the entire part. Then after, he's like, "Doug, this is so good, we got to bring you up on the main stage." So I went up on the main stage, to all of Running Man, 1,000+ people, and talked about sprouts.
Mm.
So, and you understand, like, this is just the beginning. We're going to
Yeah,
have like millions of people are going to be sprouting.
I'm thinking how does it look to supply this in a better way to people daily, that isn't in a like a plastic tub in Whole Foods? Like what what could what technologies could you bring in to like preserve and provide essentially sprouts en masse to people at the cinema, or
Yeah.
how can it feed into like daily snacks and actually like support other foods? But that's more of like a it's not really a question. My one question I've got floating around is, what have you been wrong about, like, over the years? What things have you been wrong about?
I mean, I think what was wrong was how addictive food is.
Mm,
Like how attached people would be to food. Like I thought that if you were to sit with a rational person and tell them, what I learned, they would immediately be a convert.
yeah.
And and I found like how people would prioritize, social construct, like how their family ate for generations, as opposed to, the new information that they would have. How, like, when I got started in this journey 25 years ago, I thought, like, oh, this is so obvious, I've changed. And then I've seen people struggling with change, that were there at the same, starting point as myself, but still struggling and still, eating bad things. That the asymmetry of knowledge and resource of the food industry versus an individual, it's like they don't even have a fighting chance. Like
Mm,
someone just wants to be healthy, and the food companies are able to understand what these people think. How can you activate them with marketing or branding or pricing or accessibility to help you, and then to get them to get it, and then they add the artificial flavors, colors, salt, oil, sugar, to get this brain explosion of dopamine as the satisfaction of eating this crapamine that 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 people, hard to break away. And to try to like take someone's food away, it's like the metaphor of the dog on the bone. Like you go to try to take someone's food away when they're eating, like they'll tear your head off. And I was naive in thinking like, oh, everyone just wants to be healthy.
yeah. Yeah, it's a big one. A lot of people know how, but the convenience and the price, it's set up to fail, It's set up to, I mean, the data doesn't lie. Like obesity, diabetes is just it's rife. Have you read Ultra Processed People?
I have not, but the title says it all, right?
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, in America, we have 266 million people that are overweight or obese, and we have over 90 million people that are diabetic or pre-diabetic,
mm,
and we have thousands of people that have heart disease, hypertension, cancer, like, and there's so much of that is directly tied to diet and consumption.
mhm. Yeah, and you know, you were very close to lots of family members, right? So your mum died of
Yeah,
cancer, your father heart
yeah.
disease, your
And
brother.
my aunt diabetes.
Uh-huh.
So
So can we
it's
talk
just been,
a bit about that?
tragic.
A bit about your journey of like, yeah, realigning with your own truth around, what's what can happen actually in terms of change, like the pain of change being greater or lesser than the pain of staying the same, right? So what was that like for you? I'm curious to know, like, that process over those years of like really admitting that something needs to change.
I mean, it's so hard. It's really like so hard that, the first course, right, is to try to get a loved one healthy the healthy way, right? And if they don't want to do it, that's hard. And then if you acquiesce and say, well, let's get them healthy in the standard way, with the Ozempic and the blood thinners and the weight loss drugs, etc. And they still don't want to get healthy. Like, it just becomes this pain, and the only liberation to the pain is the surrender, when you realize, like, you can really only be responsible for yourself, and to try to help someone else and try to change another person is just unlikely. And at best, it's just unlikely that you'll get, their change at best. So with that knowledge, like, all you can do is make efforts. But if you tie your happiness to the success of a circumstance out of your control, then it's suicide. So, you don't want to become apathetic and just write people off. But what I've learned over the last several years is that people have got to want to change, and they've got to want to do the work, right? And they make the sacrifices. And if not, the universe will bury them. There's like an expression in the desert that if you don't take care of something in the desert will bury it. It'll just take it back. Like, the sun and the winds and the sand will just take it back to the level, be gone.
That's
The
such an
desert is very good.
interesting way of seeing like the yeah, the planet like reclaiming things that are out of control almost. They're like trying to bring things back into balance by like drawing it all back, rather than growing outwards, I say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's unfortunate. And so what I tend to do is like make sure that, like, I'm doing the best that I can, and taking time to do podcasts like this, to talk about sprouts and give people the awareness, like in the US. Where are most of your listeners? The UK or globally or US?
Yeah, more than half are in the UK, but then all over Europe and America a little bit, but most UK.
Yeah. So I think it's just a level, like, I want to give hope
For
that
sure.
if someone wants to change, sprouts are the solution, you know.
I was curious. I was looking at some sprout kits before the pod, and there was options for like light and dark, and that surprised me. I did not feel
Yeah.
like what's the darkness about, and like obviously, I think most people when they quick search, quick leaning into your work, it's quite self-explanatory how to grow sprouts, and most listeners will know. But it's like, okay, can I go out of my way to produce something that intellectually might not make sense? Like, well, unless you, I guess rationally, then maybe intellectually, if you dived into the science, for sure it does. But like when you look at a sprout and you think that's not what I've told is going to fill me up. That's not what I've
Yeah.
told. It's like this intellectualizing of what stories we were bought into. So how do people, yeah, get a kit, start growing your sprouts? What's one hurdle people come to and then they just sack it in that can be overcome?
Well, I think that the essence of this transformation has to begin from within. And what we can do is we can provide solutions. Now, one of the big solutions that Sprouts can offer is that they are inexpensive, right? So they're affordable. They're fast growing. They're super nutritious. And intellectually, people get like they're healthy. Like they've always been in the health world, right? Whether people have done them or not.
Sure.
So the step begins with how can we get people to experiment. And so my purpose, right, and what I'm doing in my life mission is creating a movement, right? And the way you create a movement, is like different for every movement, right? So in this movement, like, who are the stakeholders? Who are you appealing to? There's yoga people that are just kind of spiritual. There's religious people. There are people that are early adopters, right? Like the Jessie Itzlers of the world, they're early adopters. They're sprouting with their kids. Everything is great. There are chefs, people who are already plant-based, but they may be plant-based or vegan for ethical and moral reasons, not necessarily for environmental or health. And if they're already open to change, then they can incorporate it in further. There are chefs that are focused on culinary delight, like, art. They're experiencing art as an experience through culinary. And if they start to consume it, then there's people who have a real dying crisis. They're overweight, and Sprouts are incredible for them for weight loss because they're high fiber, low calorie, low fat, low sugar. So the ultimate weight loss food. And if they're eating them, the more they eat, the more weight loss they'll have, the more vitality, the more nutrients. So it's incredible for weight loss. Then there's a level of, in America, 90 million people that are diabetic or pre-diabetic. And Sprouts actually help regulate insulin levels in diabetics because of the medicinal properties of opening up new pathways in the body. And then, there's 1 million firefighters in America, right? So those people have all breathed in benzene and other air pollutants from smoke. But then we have people that are volunteering to destroy their lungs through smoking cigarettes or marijuana. And the combustion of tobacco or cannabis is also creating toxins in the lungs that are seemingly irreparable damage, but there's components of the Sprouts that can actually make them better. And so then there's people that are starving, and you can appeal to them with, hey, here's food. We know you might prefer a McDonald's Happy Meal or a steak or pizza, but this is food. So if you are really hungry, you would eat this food because this is food. So, and then to create this social construct around growing your own food. During World War II, 40% of Americans were growing their own food. Today, less than 1% of Americans grow their own food. Yet we have 330 million people. We have 120 million households. So, since we're starting at such a small base, it's easy to double, triple, quadruple, and make inroads into growing food. So that's like my macro part. The fact that I know that it works at my core, like inside, I really know unequivocally, that's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes out, it comes across for sure. That's why I just, yeah, it's just an energy that you can feel. It's like you're speaking your truth and you're connected to it. It comes for someone who can feel people. It's like, yeah, it's
Oh,
definitely.
I mean, you're doing so. What's your experience with Sprouts, Chris?
Well, let's dive in, shall we? I've had these guys for, I've had them that long in their packet, that the labels come off. It's actually come right off, and I can't even read what they are. So let's play a little game. But yeah,
Oh my
sprouts.
God.
I probably not good to eat, right? If it's been that long, they're probably
Well,
about a year.
you could try them. I don't know how long they've been inactive and how dormant they'll be, but
Yeah.
they
So,
certainly can work.
so would you agree with this? Soak overnight, discard water, rinse twice daily, will sprout in 4 to 6 days, store in fridge for 7 to 10 days.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessary to store them. I would encourage people to, grow them and eat them, but
Yeah,
you can store.
you can.
But
So my experience, I remember I definitely when I got wind of all this in your work, it was like, okay, let's give it a shot. They went rancid quite quick. I wasn't draining them enough. I was just leaving in a jar, rinsing the water, but then like, yeah, leaving them on the side. So it wasn't a proper process. So it's definitely something I'm diving into again and actually going to do it properly because I just believe that it's so highly beneficial, and an easy way. My next question is going to be the mindset that people have. How do you speak to the mindset of people that look at sprouts and they are just like, that's not going to fill me up?
I think that the interesting thing that people have no idea. And so the best way to experience it is to say, okay, let's have a sprout-based meal. And Mike Posner and I host
Yeah,
sprout-based meals in LA, and people come. Like I remember inviting, Max Lugavere, to our dinner, and we ate all sprouts. And this may have been his first meal that he didn't have red meat on, in decades, right? And so, and he was full, and he wanted to come back for more. So I think that the greatest example for that is giving people, the opportunity and asking them to suspend their beliefs so that they can experience what it's like. Now, one of the things and that I realized is that people want to be healthy. I'm doing this, this talk this evening, right? I'll be, after this thing, before your podcast will drop after this thing posts, but I'm doing it with a MBA, MPH, PhD in New York, Dr. Na Solo, who she's the head of community outreach at New York Presbyterian Hospital. And she runs a program called Heart Smarts. And she's enrolled people from all over the country that have a chronic illness, that are somewhat faith-based, that want to transform their life. And they all read my book. And then we get on big Zoom calls, hundreds of people, and we answer questions and we talk a little about it. It almost feels like I'm a preacher. But what I'm doing is I'm just sharing this information. And it's so great to have people that are educated in the topic, that are experiencing it, that want to take it to another level. And I see that there's a lot of negative things that can be done using these channels. And there's also a lot of positive things that can be done with the channels and the information. And curating and filtering out the things that don't serve you and bring in more of the things that do serve you, like your cold challenges and your meditation and you're, experiencing wilderness, like helping people get out of, their normal routine. And people want to change, but they also may be addicted to stimulation. They may be addicted to substances. They may be addicted to, apathy. They may have, traumatic wounds from childhood. So it's just important to greet people with an open heart and see if you can calibrate where they are.
Yeah.
And some people just don't want to change, and other people want to change. So I think that you want to talk to people that are open-minded, that want to have change, but then you also spend a little time talking to everybody to see if you can get some new recruits inbound.
Yeah, plant some seeds. That's all you can do, really. Everywhere you go, just keep planting those seeds, bro, and they'll sprout one day, or maybe not. So the seeds that I have, this podcast will be out in a couple of weeks, so it'll give me a good amount of time to go through the process. So I'm going to share my experience over the course of the next couple of weeks and share it when the pod comes out. So yeah. I feel are you plant-based now? Because I know you were for 15 years.
Oh yeah, I've been 100% plant-based over 25 years. Strict vegan, mostly raw. So probably over 95% raw for these 25 years.
And because I know you do talk about that quite a lot in the book of really testament to weight loss being plant-based diet and then getting a lot of nutrition from sprouts. Do you still feel that's like one of the best way to reduce weight loss?
I unequivocally, I think that fruits, like there's three methods of weight loss that I believe in, right? One that applies to all of them are all plants, right? I think just plants are great, the fiber, the nutrients. You can do intermittent fasting, smaller feeding windows, just makes it easier to eat less food. So that's a good thing. And just being able to psychologically enjoy the feeling of hunger in the mornings. I like raw. And if I'm doing raw, I will do raw sprouts, raw fruits, raw seaweeds. Another level, independent of my proselytization, just costs more money, is someone could do fruit only, like fruit only. And I should say high carbohydrate fruit, right? So not the avocados, not nuts, but just wet-based fresh fruit. People can have extraordinary weight loss eating a lot of fruit. And then alternatively would be whole food, plant-based, no salt, oil, or sugar. And that could encompass fruits, it could encompass sprouts, but it also can encompass starches like sweet potatoes, and yams and squashes that are very filling, maybe even brown rice or quinoa, that if people are eating those, they'll get the calories, they'll have more of a familiar part, slightly lower vibration because everything's being cooked. But instead of having so much fruit, they're having these starches. Now, what I feel like is that level of hunger when you're eating fresh and raw makes you feel like you're bouncing off the walls. And so a lot of times people want to eat something heavy to bring them down from that high. What I've been recommending to people is when they're feeling that high, take a moment and breathe and meditate and focus on what do you want to do with all that energy that's flowing through you, and not try to extinguish the flame and put out the fire. Because that's what happens is people have this newfound energy, they don't know what to do, and they don't have focus, and they don't know, so therefore they want to come down.
Interesting. Quite controversial for me. I don't think I'd agree with the brown rice. And since I started eating meat, I've felt more clarity. I've felt like just a lot more, I guess, hikes, more focus, more. I went 2 years with eating plant-based diet. People do it in many different ways. There was no sprouts in the diet. Maybe I'd have felt a lot better if there was. I've had that conversation with a few people. And I think that the process of elimination in either ways, you're cutting out a lot of processed stuff, really. So I think it can work both ways of as long as you're cutting out all the crap and like not snacking a lot and like actually just focusing on cooking your own food, you know?
Yeah. Well, look, all I could say, Chris, is the longest living cultures, and they have been predominantly plant-based, and have survived. I think
Yeah.
that the processed food, not very good. The centenarians, the people that are living, 100 years or greater, centenarians, super centenarians, they're predominantly plant-based. I ate meat for 33 years. So it's not like, I was born in some monastery or some ashram, right? So I know, what it is, to do that. And I also know that there's a lot of people that, can do plant-based wrong. And so what I would
Yeah.
encourage, if just is to try, and it takes like about a month to play around, fresh fruit and fresh sprouts and raw greens. You're getting predominantly water, you're getting high nutrient value, and see how that feels, because most people have never even remotely done that. It's so different than plant-based, where you're eating things that are dead, right? That are hard to process, hard to digest, versus things that are predominantly water-based and micronutrient and enzymatically rich.
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely work for people for sure. 100%. I think there's a lot to say about where that food is. Like that's why diets and advice is so slippery, because it really does depend like how that's grown, where the meat comes from, and like the centenarians, I feel are doing so many other things that I think diet is a small part personally, because community, I see people grow into their old age in this country with a very challenging diet and like not good high processed refined sugars, but then they live really old because they're connected to service and their community. And I don't know, like how much is diet a part of it, a big part, but it's like there's so many other factors to living like a healthy lifestyle and longevity, and that's what this podcast is about. It's not just about one thing, but yeah, I think food is definitely it makes up. It's the foundation. It's the foundation. No one can argue with that. Um, Beautiful, man. So what's to come? What are you up to now? What are you most excited about?
I mean, I think the thing I'm most excited, I realized like there hadn't been a lot of advancements in sprouting technology, in hundreds of years, that mostly people were sprouting using a mason jar, which was designed for canning, from the early 1800s. And so I worked on a new integrated sprouting kit, and I worked on getting seeds available that were organic, tested for pathogens, tested for high germination rate. So we're rolling those out, in the US under, this, simple, the sprouting company. So very simple, and I like the logo, which has been around, since the beginning of time, right? Just made out of sprouts. But so what I like about the kit is that anything that's touching the sprouts is stainless steel or glass, and
Yeah.
has a nice, like, simple design that you'd want to have, and a dish tray, a drip tray that you can empty. So this is all recycled plastic. This is glass, and that's stainless steel. So I've been working on that for a while. And, I'm working on white papers. I published my first white paper on safety. And now I'm working on another white paper of life cycle analysis. And whereas it takes about 1,500 gallons of water to prepare 1 pound of beef,
Mm.
and you could grow a pound of sprouts with 1 gallon of water.
Mm-hmm.
So the resources required to grow sprouts are like literally 1/1500th of that of almost any other food. And so, when we have a crisis of resources, and they're, cutting down the rainforests, and they're planting monocrops and all these other things, it just becomes compelling to see how you can live in a van, and you could be growing your sprouts in the van in small footage. And because you're not going to be growing a cow, you're not going to be having a cow traveling with you in the van, in the Sprinter, and then, killing it every 3 years and chopping it up and having 3 years worth of food while you harvest another one. So it's all a matter of, like, the balance of where you are in the world and what is important to you. And I realize that, while there's multiple wars going on, and there's injustice, and there's travesty, and there's, economic collapses and other things, like, where do we focus? So I feel fortunate. For me, I could focus on my family, and I could focus on sprouts, and I feel very complete.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful, man. I think there's a market for the van lifers there. A little sprouting kit for van lifers specifically, that it's not gonna, when you turn around the corner, it's not gonna fall over and smash. And boats as well. It's like
Yeah.
people that live in boats, right? But yeah,
Well,
it's
Captain Hook, fed his sailors or his pirates sprouts while they
yeah.
were out at sea, so they didn't get scurvy.
Vitamin C, right?
So there's precedent. There's precedent at sea life. And I could literally say there's hundreds of people sprouting in vans, across America right now. Hundreds.
Yeah. Great, man. Okay, quick fire round before you go. You talked about avocado seeds, and I think, wow, no one really gets this or knows this, because everyone's loving avocados, but you said the seed is one of the most potent parts. So how do we
That's right.
sprout? How do we sprout an avocado seed?
Well, after you eat the avocado, you wash the seed,
Yeah.
and then you soak it in water, for a couple of hours. It will become really soft. And then you put 2 toothpicks or 3 toothpicks in the side, and then you put it into a jar. So it's half submerged, subterranean, and half above. And then it will sprout and then grow into an avocado plant. Or you could take that germinated avocado seed and throw it in the blender and eat it.
Mm. Not a fan, but yeah, you could definitely. Love that. And did you see that video recently? I'm sure it went viral. There was a guy who was like, "Don't throw it away and do this with it." And I'll send it
Oh,
you because
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and like I don't know how much of that was like, bang for your buck. It's probably not much of what I saw, but yeah, it was similar to that. It was like you could sprout things and grow them. But yeah, it's a reframe really. It's trying to get into that psyche of people that are just so used to one thing and just doing away with things. So buckwheat sprouts. I'm a big fan of buckwheat. You get seed? Is that the buckwheat seeds? Because obviously we know the
You
husks.
get fresh, raw, unhulled buckwheat, and then you soak them, overnight. You rinse them a couple times, and then they're chewy, they're textury, they're protein based. They're overall terrific.
Mm. And the other thing I love was giving sprouts to your pets. I can see this happening more and more. Just sprinkling those
Yeah,
sprouts.
there's a whole angle about sprouts for science, technology, engineering, and math. So sprouts being in for STEM. So I think that that's powerful.
Yeah. Okay, man. Appreciate your time, brother. Appreciate you jumping on with me and just
Hey,
spouting the sprout.
thanks so much. Yes, send the link when you're live, Chris. You have the best day ever. Good week. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing, man.